Hello and welcome to my channel. If you've been here before, welcome back. My name is Alfonso Peluso and I'm a Studio Associate Professor in the College of Architecture at IIT, the home of the legendary Mies van der Rohe, and I'm adjunct faculty at Columbia College Chicago in the Interior Architecture program. Shout out to all of my students. I hope you're doing well, getting ready for school. School starting soon for some of you. Some of you it's already in progress. It's already in progress for me. It's a nice sunny day in Chicago, so I'm doing well. Today's video is going to look at Rhino Materials. So this is part of a series that I've been calling Back to Basics. Rhino Back to Basics. We did some Rhino modeling. We looked at loft, extrude, sweep, revolve. We looked at setting up a basic Rhino scene for Rhino rendering, and now we're going to be adding materials to that Rhino scene. Alright, before we get started, if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and find me on YouTube, click on the red subscribe button, then click on the bell and click on all to receive all the notifications of when my latest videos are out. There's a lot here for you to look at and choose from. Also, I've been having a nice time connecting with you guys on Instagram at my first name Alfonso underscore my last name Peluso. Alright, connect with me on Instagram to see what I'm up to, not only on YouTube but with my students at school. Alright, let's jump into the tutorial. So we ended the last tutorial, which was called Rhino Scene, and I'll put a link to that Rhino Scene video at the end of this tutorial. But I'm going to go ahead and open that scene up. Okay, so that scene ends up here with a basic Rhino scene. We looked at setting up a camera. We looked at setting up a sun. Today we're going to look at Rhino material basics. And the first thing that I have on the outline is square, seamless, low res. So those are my three requirements for material textures. We're going to be finding a wood floor material texture to start with. And I want to make sure that it's square, seamless, and low res. Alright, so let's head over and let's do a Google search for wood floor seamless texture. Wood floor seamless texture, and we'll go to images. Okay, so I'm looking for something that's square, something that's low res, and something that's seamless. And I can always make some adjustments in Photoshop. For instance, I like this image, this light wood floor here. I also like that it shows more area of wood floor than, let's say, its neighbor, the one next to it to the right. This one, even though is seamless, I would start to see this pattern repeat itself, and we'll see that when we apply our marble texture. Sometimes they can be seamless, but they have a pattern, and then it starts to get that 1980s Super Mario Brothers video game look to it, which we want to avoid. So I'm going to go ahead with this one. Again, not square, but we'll make it square in Photoshop. So I am going to open image in new tab, and I'm going to save this. Okay. Alright. It's okay, I already have one in there, but we'll overwrite it. Okay, so let's go over to Photoshop. This is what we're going to have in the very end here. This is going to be our end image. Let's go ahead and open up our wood floor. Okay, so if I go to main menu image, canvas size, I'm going to make this square. So I'm just working in pixels. I like to work in pixels because it's easier than working in inches. See, in inches we get all these decimal places, but pixels is pretty easy to divide or make something square. So I'm going to make this square. I'm going to make it 768 by 768. I'm going to anchor it to the left. Okay, so now it's square. It is low res. The image size is only 768 pixels by 768 pixels, so that's low resolution. It's only 1.69 megabytes. You have to be careful when you're using material samples or image textures that are, let's say, 3000 pixels by 3000 pixels. If you have a whole bunch of those loaded into your scene, it starts to add up and it starts to slow your scene down. So if your scene starts to get slow, that's something you want to look at. What is the resolution of the material textures? So 768 by 768 is low. Okay, so it's square, it's low, it's seamless. Okay, what's the area of wood floor? What am I looking at? Because I have to tell Rhino how big or small to make this floor texture. Rhino has no idea. So there is about 30 of these wood floor planks if you were to count. I think there's maybe 32 of these. Okay, so now you know how many wood floor planks you have across. Now it's just assigning a dimension to each one of those wood floor planks. And I'm going to say roughly about 4 inches. So we have about 120 inches, which is about 10 feet. So we're looking at about 10 feet by 10 feet of floor area here, which is a pretty good size for a material texture in Rhino. We'll see it repeat every 10 feet, but it won't have that Super Mario Brothers game look to it where it repeats every few inches. Alright, so I'm going to save this. Alright, okay, so let's get that into our Rhino scene. So a few things we have to do in Rhino. One thing we're going to have to do is set what's called a mapping widget. Okay, a mapping widget. I love that term. That's what we really need. That's our go-to widget there. That's the widget that's going to set the size of the material sample. That's very important for us. So let's start to look at this mapping widget. Alright, so I'm going to start by selecting my floor, and I'm going to go to materials. Sorry, not materials. I'm going to go to properties. Okay, so I'm here under properties, and I'm going to apply a box mapping. Okay, so again, I have the wood floor object. I have the floor object selected in Rhino. I've gone to the properties tab here, and I'm going to go to apply box mapping. Now if you don't see a properties tab, you just click on the gear in the upper right, and you can find your properties tab from the list here, and you could bring that out. It's down here. It's in alphabetical order. Okay, so again, I'm going to click on apply box mapping, and I'm just going to draw in the Rhino viewport. I'm just going to draw a box any size. Okay, I'm just drawing that box any size. Okay, now you have to remember I forget this all the time. In the command line it's saying capped, so we have to finish this command after we draw the box. So Y for yes, enter. Okay, so that widget went away, but we'll get that widget back. We'll get that widget back by typing in mapping widget. Okay, mapping widget, and then there is another question it's asking us, so just keep an eye on the command line. Okay, there's our mapping widget, and we said that mapping widget was going to be 10 feet, and the reason that I'm able to put in 10 by 10 by 10 is because we're working in, our units are feet in this file. Okay, so there's our mapping widget, and I can move this around using the gumball. So what's going to happen if we look at the bottom square, the very bottom square that's 10 feet by 10 feet, that's where the wood floor sample is going to sit, that wood floor texture, and then it's going to repeat itself over and over, or what's called tile itself, until it fills that entire wood floor. Okay, so let's make that happen by actually creating a material. So in our layers for floor, when I highlight that layer floor, I get a little white circle for my material. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to change that type to custom. I'm going to name it. I'm going to call this wood floor. And then I'm going to scroll down under textures, and the texture for color, I'm going to click to assign texture, and I'm going to choose wood floor light. Okay, and I'm going to click OK. And then that's going to show up now in my viewport. It shows up in my viewport because my viewport is rendered. That's the only place it's going to show up. It's not going to show up in wireframe or shaded. It's only going to show up in rendered. Now, if I move it around, if I move the widget around, it's moving the texture around with it. So the widget allows me to not only scale it, but place it. So that wood floor texture is sitting right there in the bottom of that square, and then it's tiling itself. So if I was to go back to properties, I'm going to lock the XYZ size so it stays square. Okay, so if this is 5 feet, that texture is going to get a lot smaller. It's going to be half the size. If that texture is 20 feet, it's going to get a lot bigger. Okay, we figured out exactly that it would be 10. Alright, so that's looking pretty good. Let me do a save as here. Okay, so we've got that saved. So what does that look like if we're going to render it? So I'm going to go over to my render dialog box, and I'm going to render this out. So we've actually been working at 1920 by 1280, so pretty high res, high definition there. I'm going to render out at half that, so I'm going to render out at 960 by 640. Okay, just to get our quick test renders going. The other thing that I should point out, and I'll show you where it is the transparent background button is checked on. So transparent background allows me to save a PNG so that the background is already cut out and empty so that I could place, let's say, a sky behind here. Okay, so there's our wood floor texture. It's looking fantastic. It looks great. Okay, where is our transparent background? There is our transparent background. That's checked on. Okay, if it's not checked on, it's going to render with the blue background. Alright, so let's go ahead and make a marble texture for the columns. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to do it a little bit differently this time. This time I'm going to actually make the material ahead of time. So I'm going down to columns, and I'm going to click on the white circle. I'm going to change its type from plaster to custom. I'm going to name it marble. Okay, now we don't have the texture to assign yet, so we'll come back to it. Okay, so let's go over to the web and let's get a marble texture. Okay, so I had typed in wood floor seamless texture. Now I'm going to type in marble. And the first one there is square. It's not low res, it's high res. So we're going to keep an eye on this as we go through and make this material. Okay, it's high res, it's 3000 pixels by 3000 pixels, but we're going to work with it. So open image in new tab. I'm going to go ahead and save image as, save this as marble. Okay, let's take a look at that in Photoshop. Okay, so what we're going to see here is that this is a seamless texture, but because it's such a small area, we're going to see it repeat itself. We're going to see, for instance, this in the upper right. We're going to see that texture. We're going to see that repeating itself. So we'll have to deal with that. But let's just use it as it is. Let's say that this is about, I don't know, maybe 2 to 4 feet. 2 to 4 feet of material texture. We'll go with that. Okay. So we need to set up our mapping widget. We'll set it up to begin with at 2 feet. So now there's multiple columns here. So I'm selecting all 3 of the columns, or if there was more than 3, I would select all my columns and apply the mapping widget to all of the columns at once. So to do that, I'm going to go to Properties. We're going to click on Apply Box Mapping. We're going to draw our box. Okay, we're going to remember to click Capt Yes. And we're going to set that box size. Let's set it to 2 by 2 by 2, and let's lock it. And then let's type in the command line, let's type in mapping widget. Okay, mapping widget, and then hit enter one more time. There's our mapping widget. Alright, so all we need to do now is put the marble texture into the material. So I'm going to go to Layer, and I'm going to click on Marble, and I'm going to click to assign texture and choose Marble. And we'll click OK. Alright, so you can already see it here. You start to see that pattern. It's starting to repeat itself. Okay, so even though it's seamless, it's still giving us that 80s video game look to it. So we have to work around it. It's worth rendering this out. Okay, so when you render it, you see it much more. Some people will ask me, why do you use a box texture mapping widget? Well, this column is a perfect example of why, because if it's a box, then it wraps correctly around the sides of the column. Okay, so let's head over to Photoshop to go ahead and fix this. So the way that we're going to fix this is I'm going to unlock the background layer, and I'm going to double the canvas size. So I'm going to go to Main Menu, Image, Canvas Size. I'm going to lock it to the lower left. I'm going to change this to pixels, and I'm going to double it. Okay, so some of you are like, wow, it was 3,000 pixels. Now it's 6,000 pixels. So it's really getting out of hand. It's really getting high res. So I'll come back in the end and I'll make sure I deal with the low resolution element of it. So here we go, 6,000 pixels by 6,000 pixels. And I'm going to copy that layer. I'm using the shortcut Control J or Command J if you're on a Mac. And I'm going to copy that layer. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on it, or actually I'm going to use Control T for transform, and then right click, and I'm going to choose rotate 90 degrees. Okay, so I'm changing the placement of that texture, the way that it's orientated. And we'll come back and we'll do some other things too. And then I'm going to right click and choose merge visible, and I'll use Control J again. Okay, and I'll use Control T for transform or Command T, and I'm going to flip this horizontal. Alright, so we're getting that, sometimes you see that marble where it's mirrored or book matched, I think is what they call it. So we have a book matched texture here. Alright, but I can go in and I can start to work with some of that and take away some of that book matching. So I'm going to right click, choose merge visible, and the way that I'm going to get rid of some of that book matching is I'm going to use my clone stamp tool, and I'm going to make the size of that bigger, a little bit bigger than that. Okay, let's go with that size. Okay, so I need to target an area. I'm looking for an area that's pretty negative space, is kind of open, neutral, I should say. Alright, so I'm getting some of that neutral area. So it's cloning that neutral. So I'm getting rid of the seam. Okay, and I'll do something similar vertically. Okay, and you can continue. You could spend a lot of time if you want to get rid of some of the the book matching elements of it, you could go in there and take away more than that. Okay, so I'm going to work with this, and I'm going to make this low res now. So I'm going to go to image size, and I'm going to make it just 1,000 pixels. That is plenty. Okay, and we're going to save this. Save it as a PSD, and also save it as a JPEG. So I'm not bringing the PSD files into Rhino, I'm bringing in the JPEG files. Okay, square, low res, seamless. Let's check it out. Okay, so it should automatically update. I shouldn't have to do anything, but I will have to change its size because it is larger now. It is more area that we're looking at. Before we were only looking at just the lower left hand portion, so it is twice as big now. So we do have to change that. So under our properties for the columns, we're going to make this, let's go ahead and make it 5. Okay, alright. Let's bring up our last rendering. So under render, open last rendering. That's our last rendering, and then let's go ahead and render another one out. So this will be our less repetition with our marble texture. Now, we haven't added any reflectivity to the floor or the marble. Marble and wood flooring has a little bit of glossiness and a little bit of reflectivity. Reflectivity and glossiness adds to the rendering time, so we're going to come back in the end today and add that in, but we want these renderings to keep moving quickly, so we haven't added it yet. Alright, so we've looked at the wood floor, we've looked at the marble. Now we're going to look at brick, which is, it's identical to these two. It's identical to the wood floor and the marble, but we just want to look at another example to really get this down. Alright, so I'm going to save it. We don't have a place, or we don't have an object to apply the brick to yet, so we're going to go ahead and make one. Alright, so I haven't saved this view yet. If I type in the command named view, I can save it, and I'll call this cam01. Okay. Alright, so the reason I'm doing that is because I want to make this lower right view, I want to set that to my perspective view so that I can do some drawing in it. Now you might notice that the C-plane was left over from when this was a right view. So I can type in CP, enter, W for world, T for top. Let's get that C-plane back down. As many of you know, whoever watches my channel knows I love the C-plane. I love to master the C-plane. Alright, so we're going to take layer 4 and I'm going to call this brick wall. That's current. I'm going to go ahead and make a box. Okay. Just making a box to infill this entire area here. Okay. So you see that showing up on the left. That's the brick wall. Now right now it's 1 foot thick. It's the size of the column. I'm going to do a scale 1D and make it 6 inches. Okay. Get a little shadow there and definition. Alright, so that's working out well. Let's go ahead and doesn't matter how you want to approach this, if you want to make the material first, or I like putting the mapping widget on first. Actually, that's the approach I like to take. So with that wall selected, I'll go to properties and I'll click on apply box mapping and I'll draw my little widget. Okay. Now I don't know what size to make it because I haven't gotten the brick texture yet. So I guess the way that I really like to do it is find my brick texture, know how big it is, then make my mapping widget, and then make my material. So find texture, mapping widget, material. That's the order that I like to go in. Okay, not a big deal. So let's go find some brick. Alright, so we just been typing in brick and then seamless texture. Alright, so is the first one square? Okay, that one's not quite square, but I think we can deal with it. Alright, let's go with this one. This one is actually square. It's a little bit different. It's a little bit more rustic. It has a different look to it. So let's go with it. It's low res and square. So let's go with it. And you're free to pick any one of those you'd like. Call this brick 2. Alright, so I'm going to open that up in Photoshop so we can figure out how much brick we have. Brick is a little bit different to look at here in terms of figuring out its size. Alright, so every 3 bricks is 8 inches. Okay, so what do we have? Here's a set of 3, 1, set of 3, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, say about 30 bricks. Okay, so 10 sets of 3. So every set of 3 is about 8 inches, as I mentioned. So this is about 80 inches. So we could say between 7 and 10 feet of brick. Okay, it doesn't have to be that exact. So between 7 and 10 feet of brick, and we'll adjust that in Rhino. Okay, so that mapping widget. Let's take a look at that mapping widget. So that's selected. Okay. Let's go over and I didn't click on the CapGS. See, it still gets me. Okay, so let's go with 10. Let's go with 10 feet for now. And we'll lock that. That'll be our mapping widget size. Let's go into layers and make our custom material. Okay. I'm a big fan of custom because you're in charge. You're in charge of all the settings, and you don't have to worry about some setting that someone made on a pre-made material that's making your rendering take long. Okay. Alright, so there's our brick showing up. Alright, I always like to save before I render. Go ahead and render this and take a look at how good it looks. Alright, so while that's rendering, let's look at our outline. Okay, so we've looked at square, seamless, low res, wood floor, mapping widget, marble, and brick. Okay, a couple things left. Glass and our bonus 3D warehouse. We're going to look at bringing a piece of furniture into the rendering. Alright, so this is looking good. Brick looks a little big. But for now we'll work with it. So our ceiling, we haven't put haven't made a material yet for the ceiling. Just going to call this ceiling, and I'm just going to leave it like that. Ceiling, I'm just going to leave it the default custom. Okay, so we need glass. We're going to make 3 glass objects that we place into here. So glass, as I mentioned, we have to be really careful with glass because glass can really take a long time to render. So let's take layer 5, call this glass. I don't like to use the color white for my objects. Okay, so I'm just going to draw a box here and then scale it. Its height's going to be 10. I don't know if it is 10 feet. Let's take a look. Oh, would have been better to do this. Let's just do it in 3D. It's just so much easier to draw in 3D. Draw in 3D, you get it right the first time. Alright, now I'll scale that. So glass, students will ask me how thick to make glass, and I always tell them 1 inch is good. Alright, so we'll take that, we'll mirror it about this point, and then we'll take that one, and we'll mirror it diagonally across the column. Okay, let's go to our camera view here. Alright, so it's gotten dark inside because none of the light is coming in because these glass objects are completely opaque. So let's put a material on them. So it's not a texture, so I don't need a mapping widget. Now, under type, there is glass. I mentioned that I like to use custom because there's more flexibility, there's more control, especially over rendering time. So I'm going to choose custom. Call this glass. Okay, I'm going to give it some color, like a really light blue-green. Okay, a light bluish green for the color. Okay, so the other thing that I can work with is reflectivity. Let's go with 5% for now. I'm just double clicking on the little number. And then transparency, let's go with 75% transparent. So 5% reflectivity, 75% transparent. Now the other thing we have is index of refraction. So if I want more reflectivity than what I'm getting, I can change that to 1.5 for my index of refraction. I think that's what it is for glass. But I think we're going to get plenty of reflectivity, so we're going to keep that at 1. Okay, now the light's allowed to come back in to the space. So I'm always saving when I'm rendering because you never know when it's going to crash. So let's go ahead and click on render. So already you see that the glass has added some rendering time to it. And this is when, you know, these real-time rendering engines, this is why they're taking off and they're becoming so popular. If I had to recommend one for Rhino, I would say Enscape would be the real-time rendering engine. Also Chaos Group that makes V-Ray. They were a little late to the game, but they've just come out with a real-time rendering engine. I haven't been able to try it out, but those are so popular now. And here you can see why we're waiting a little time to render. We got a lot of glass in the foreground of our image, so it's taking a while to render out, but it shouldn't take too long. I'll let you know if I'm successful, or you'll know those of you who are watching the video if I'm successful at actually speeding up the video. So, okay, while that's rendering out, our bonus is to go to 3D Warehouse. If you haven't heard of 3D Warehouse, 3D Warehouse has everything for renderings, every 3D model you can think of. So this is now owned by Sketchup. It's actually now owned by a company, Trimble. I know it's changed hands. It's gone from Sketchup to Trimble to Google. So I don't know who owns it these days, but I'm going to look at it just has everything. Okay. So they're SketchUp models, but we can bring SketchUp models directly into Rhino seamlessly. So I'm going to type in Corbu ZA Chase Lounge. Okay, let's go with this. This is the one I used before. And I'm going to click on download, and I'm going to choose the oldest SketchUp model, okay, just to make sure that it's compatible with Rhino. So I chose 2017. Just override the one I have. Okay. So this is great stuff because it will come into here It will come into the scene the correct scale. It will come in with all the textures already applied to it, so it's not going to overpower my model. It's not going to make it take a long time to render, like you see that the glass did here. Alright, so I'm just going to escape that. That's enough. I've seen that. The glass looks pretty good. We're getting some reflectivity. It's a little dark, the glass, but we'll end up brightening that up in Photoshop. Alright. So I'm going to go to a top view because when I bring this Corbusier's Lounge in, it's going to come in at the origin at 0, 0, 0. So I'll go over to File and I'm going to go to Import. Okay, so File, Import, and I'm importing a Sketchup file into Rhino. Just going to click OK to accept the defaults. There it is. I'm going to move it over to where I'm working. Alright. See if I can rotate this. It's a little hard to see right now. Alright, let's see what that looks like in the camera. Alright, right there, that looks good. That looks perfect. Let's save this. Go ahead and render that out. Okay, while that's rendering, again, there's always something to do. We're going to need a background image. So I'm going to type in city sky. And there's a lot to choose from. I'm going to go with this one. Okay, it's got some watermark on it, but for what we're doing, I'm not too worried about it. Okay. Oh. Save the image. Okay. So wow, that Chaise Lounge looks really good. And one of the things I like about Rhino is it will tell me how much time was remaining in the rendering. Not only how much time it took, but how much time was remaining. So we'll do some Photoshop work on this. So let's go ahead and save this. We'll save it as our PNG. And we'll go over to Photoshop and we'll open that up. Okay, so now you're wondering, wow, we took a long time to render the glass, but we're not seeing any of the reflection. It's there, trust me. So let's go ahead and open this city sky, and I'm just going to Control A to select all, Control C to copy, and Control V to paste. And I'll drop this underneath. And let's see how this fits in here. Alright, so that looks pretty decent. So I'm just going to make a few copies of this background and place it actually behind. So I'm just trying to fill in this space in the front here. Just try to fill that in and make it look a little bit believable. Okay. Alright, so I'm also going to merge down all of those, merge visible, and I'm going to make this a little bit transparent. I'm also going to brighten it up. I like to make the backgrounds bright but transparent as well, so they kind of fade away, so that the rendering becomes the focus. So with the rendering itself, I like to always do an image adjustments, brightness, contrast at the very least, along with some other tools as well. Okay, now I'm realizing that we didn't add in any of the reflectivity on the columns or the wood floor. We can easily come back and put that into, paste that into here. So let's just save this as a PSD. Okay, so let's head back over to Rhino and okay, our materials. Alright, so here we have wood floor and marble. So I'm going to click on wood floor and I'm going to add some glossiness to it and a little bit of reflectivity. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing with marble. I'm going to add a little bit of glossiness and a little bit of reflectivity to it. Okay. Alright. So what I'm going to do now is, I don't know how that looks. I have no idea how that glossiness or that reflectivity looks. But I want to see it before I make my final rendering. But I also don't want to wait as long as I just did. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off, I'm going to make my default layer current and turn off glass. And layer 0 had the furniture on it. Okay, so that should render out quickly and give me an idea of what that reflectivity and glossiness looks like. Not seeing too much on the columns, just really maybe not enough to reflect. The floor, the wood floor looks pretty good, so maybe I'll add some more reflectivity and glossiness to the marble. Wood floor looks nice though. Alright, let's just go for it. Turning all my layers back on, saving it, and rendering. Alright, that looks great with the added reflectivity and glossiness. Let's go ahead and save this one. And let's get this placed in. This should be pretty easy to place in. Let's open that up. So Control A, Control C. Control V. Let's get some brightness contrast going. Yeah, that helps. It just makes it pop a little bit more. Alright, looks really good. Not a bad rendering for straight out of Rhino. I think it's actually really impressive. It's actually pretty good. Just straight out of Rhino, no plugins, No Lumion, no Enscape, no V-Ray. The only problem was we had to wait a little extra for the rendering time, but I think it looks really good. If you found this video helpful, please give me a like below. Tell me in the comments why you like this video. My head is going to pop up. Click on my head to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Also, there's going to be a link to the playlist, Back to Basics Rhino, and also the how to set up a scene to render, the video before this one. Alright, I will see you on the next one.